Hello, class. My name is James Broughton. I'm going to be doing my conflict brief on the criminal violence in Mexico. Mexico is located just south of the U.S. border, and it extends from San Diego, California, the whole way to Brownsville, Texas. And its most southern borders are Guatemala and Belize. The historical background, it just didn't come up 20 or 30 years ago. It's been happening for centuries. Illegal contraband and migration. 1937, we had the marijuana tax law. In the 60s and 70s, we had marijuana and heroin. In 1980s, some heroin and cocaine. In 1990s, we had the methamphetamines. In 2010s, we had heroin. And in the last 50 years, we can see marijuana, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine has been the main drug that's targeting the United States and the Canadian streets. So you can see that this is not just a Mexico problem. Okay, and then the major players is Pablo Escobar. He was the big man in Colombia, responsible for all the cocaine coming in and out of the United States. And then you had Felix Gallardo, who was the godfather of Mexican drug trafficking. You had Juan Guzman Laredo, which is his nickname is El Chapo. We'll get into this a little later. And then you had four presidents. I wanted to concentrate this brief on probably the last 20 or 30 years. So I only counted, went back four presidents because they served 6 years in Mexico. And the very first president that I'm going to discuss, D. Gartaro, from 1988 to 94. He actually went to jail. He's one of the corrupt members in the government. His family was part of a drug trafficking organization, and he actually went to jail. And then you got the Mexican government, their military, the U.S. government, the Drug Enforcement Agency. You got ICE, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Border Control, and of course the drug gangs in and outside of each border, or of the border, in Mexico and the United States. And then currently El Chapo has 150,000 people employed worldwide in 50 different nations. And the source of concept in which the conflict is based, the economy, obviously, the corruption there from every level of government, greed and grievances. When you have drug wars, you got people getting killed, people greedy over money, greedy over turf, and people get killed, and it causes a lot of grievance. It's not a civil war, but it is a war on drugs and the cartels, and between the government, the military, the cartels. And then power and control is a big problem. You got human rights violations, supply and demands of these drugs in and out of the United States. And then you got the marijuana tax law in 1937, which prohibited the flow of marijuana into the United States. And it also persuaded the government of the United States to get Mexico to quit producing other narcotics, because obviously they were going to end up in the United States. So back in the 1960s, then we had this movement of marijuana coming into the United States, and a little bit of heroin. And then the 70s and 80s, we had this cocaine movement from the Medellin cartel from Pablo Escobar in Mexico coming through Florida. But that got shut down by the DEA, and his trafficking actually got rerouted through Mexico. And then you have the Beltran Leyva, who were the cultivators and of all the poppy and drugs being produced in Mexico. And then you got El Chapo, which we'll talk about a little later. And then you have this godfather of drug trafficking, Felix Gallardo, who was responsible for all the trafficking in Mexico. And in 1989, he actually went to jail for the murder of a U.S. drug enforcement agent. And he went to jail, and he got arrested, and 80 other policemen got arrested with him. But prior to going to jail, he decided he wanted to break his country up into turfs, and provide those turfs with leaders that could keep the drug trafficking going. So, hence, you got the Tijuana, the Gulf, the Juarez, the Sinaloa, and the Zeta cartels, all trying to capitalize on the border of the United States, getting the drugs in and out. Each of these cartels basically have a zone in the border in which they are trafficking the drugs in and out of the United States. And then, of course, the president. He's the corrupt one, President Duterte. And then in 1993, when Pablo Escobar caught a bullet in his head, the drugs, like I said earlier, all got routed through Mexico, and then El Chapo and his Sinaloa cartel decided they were going to control all of that. They were going to make all the money from it, gain all the profits, and then so he's El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel had the zone on the border near Arizona. And then you had Vicente Fox and President Calderon, who decided they're going to declare an all-out war on the drug trafficking, which increased criminal violence in Mexico. You take the money out of people's hands, and they're going to do what they have to do illegally to survive and gain control. And the current president right now, Nieto, he is hell-bent on maintaining the drug on the war on drugs. And then currently the U.S. legalization of marijuana is causing these cartels to produce more heroin and methamphetamines in Mexico and push them across the border. And to date, there has been 270,000 people dead or missing. And then corruption. I wasn't going to put this slide in there, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where this of the corruption that goes on in Mexico. So you got corruption. Here's the president again. He was corrupt. You got the judicial system. They're corrupt. You got the military that's corrupt. They have this take no prisoners mentality. If they come upon a drug lord or a drug cartel and they get in a confrontation, they just shoot them because they don't want to have to go to court because of the corrupt judicial system. The drug traffickers will end up back on the streets. Then you got the police. A lot of police chiefs in Mexico are involved in these cartels. Of course, you got the border control. Nobody wants to believe that the border control is corrupt, but they are. And then you got the government, U.S. government, the arms for drugs thing that went on under the Obama administration. I won't get into that, but it happens. Okay, the effects on America. The rise in the threat. We have a tax law that created clashes between the U.S. and Mexico in 1937. Because they weren't able to get their marijuana across the border legally, they resorted to illegal business activity, and it had caused the increased security at the borders. Of course, you got the drug gangs; they create violence. You got organized crime that comes out of this, and an example of this is 200 homes in Tucson, Arizona, which is about an hour away from the border of Mexico. Were the subject of home invasions, and all of them were linked to drug trade. And then another example is one of the biggest drug hub cities in the United States is Atlanta, where 5 men were killed over a drug debt. In a 3-year period, the major drug hub cities in the United States rose from 100 to 250. And Chicago is one of the major drug hubs in the United States because they have a major link to the Sinaloa cartel hubs and the Beltran Leyva. And then, of course, the drug epidemic is an ongoing issue in the United States. And then you got these international organizations. Of course, the United States, our supply and demand, we cannot do without these drugs, so we got to keep them flowing in here from Mexico. And we have a direct reflection on their criminal violence, believe it or not. And then you got the DEA, the CIA, the FBI, you got ICE attempting to curtail the flow, but doing nothing for Mexico. In Mexico, you got the Medellin cartel and their cocaine. The cocaine still comes out of Colombia, but it's all going through Mexico now. In Afghanistan, you have the poppy and heroin production. In Central America, you have the arms and drugs thoroughfare, where there's a lot of exchange of drugs and arms. Guatemala, you have the free flow of drugs and immigrants coming in and out of Mexico. And this German engineer firm which dug the tunnel to the prison cell El Chapo recently escaped from. They captured him, but we have this German firm that was hired to dig him out of that prison. And then you got the Sinaloa cartel, who maintains presence in 50 countries across North America, South America, Australia, Europe, Asia, and then there's 150,000 employees. And then you got targets, government officials, cartels, tourists, police, immigrants. These are all targets of these drug trafficking organizations that create criminal violence. And this picture here is an image of a journalist being hung, and then this guy was the journalist helper, and they just got hung because they happened to be in the wrong place. And El Chapo even got in a confrontation with his family on the Texas border, who were working with the Beltran Leyva, and El Chapo lost his son. One of his cousins lost a brother, and it created an all-out war. And then some of the forms of human, you got torture, human trafficking, beheading, hangings, and if you're a tourist or bystander and you just happen to be there, you can get caught up in the crossfire. Conflict resolution. The war on drugs has failed for a long time. Resolution is doubtful because of the supply and demand. Annually, the death and destruction has increased, and it has increased because of the all-out wars on drugs, and it's likely to become worse. And it's spreading in the United States. For an example, you had the Sinaloa cartel in San Diego, only in San Diego. Now they're as far north as San Francisco. And then you got criminal violence in Mexico and the United States. Problem as well in the U.S. is as much responsible. And here's a couple quotes from the major players. President Nieto says this problem will never be fixed and drugs should be legalized. And then El Chapo says you will never stop it. Recommendations for resolution. Not sure beyond a full legalization. You could tax it. You can increase the Mexico's economy and possibly reduction or increase in violence by legalizing it. Reduce or stop the trafficking. Complete monitor of the border. An all-out U.S. joint drug enforcement and military effort to eradicate the DTOs. Instill citizens' trust in the government, which is doubtful because the government's already corrupt on both sides of the border. Points to ponder. If the prohibition did not happen as a result of the 1937 marijuana tax law, over 250,000 people may not have lost their lives or disappeared. Human trafficking and extortion may not have been an issue in Mexico today. And my references.